Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's Mr. Cody here in my painting studio. First off, I'd like to apologize that we didn't have a live stream last week. I was having trouble with my webcam here on my Chromebook from school, but I just had to update my Chromebook, but took some troubleshooting and I was a little confused. And so I apologize for not having one last week. So last time I saw you, we finished up my Cape Cod landscape, which turns out great. My girlfriend and I, we painted our bedroom, and it's hanging in there now, which it looks excellent. Very, very happy with that. Also, since last time I saw you, I finished another painting that I live streamed about a little while ago. Finished where is it here? My ceiling fan painting. Remember we were talking about the shadows on the ceiling last time we talked about this painting. And so I finished that up. And so today I want to talk a little bit about how I actually ended up doing the shadows on the fan painting. And then we're going to approach this landscape painting, which I've had for a while. I'm not really using any particular photograph for this painting. It's kind of just an experiment. It was a study for a while. You can see there's been lots of layers of glaze and scumbling and playing around with some material. So we're going to approach this a little bit. So the title of this video is Dry and Wet Paint Techniques. Now, the reason I'm saying that, or I want to discuss that today, is because of what we're going to do on this painting that was a little bit inspired by the ceiling fan painting. So if we come over here, right, here's my ceiling fan painting, as you can see it. So last time we talked about my ceiling fan painting, we had laid down linseed oil and then worked into that wet ground, right? Kind of a wet on wet technique to try and come up with this, with the shadows and the general kind of ethereal quality to how the paint is applied in this painting. That contrasts with the kind of stark graphic quality of the ceiling fan and, of course, the graphic quality of the grid. Now, I let that dry, right? The paint that I had laid down originally with the linseed oil, and I realized that it wasn't actually doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So I had to figure out another way to kind of achieve this blurry, ethereal, atmospheric quality to my shadows while still maintaining a sense of light. You can see, you know, over here is probably where the windows are in the room, and as the light moves across, right? It's kind of multiple light sources here with this shadow kind of during the day, but still creating that sense of contrast and sense of depth. What I actually ended up doing was using dry paint. And when I say dry paint, I don't mean that it's like literally crumbling and it is hardened and dry, but drier paint than, say, mixed with linseed oil or straight out of the tube. You work it with your brush, really smear it around on the palette a little bit without any mediums, right? This is just straight paint out of the tube that's worked down. You might be able to thin it down a little bit with some paint thinner, but that's actually going to help let it dry a little bit quicker because of its thinner properties. And then kind of scratching, pushing, scumbling it into the surface to try and maneuver it around. So what happens, I actually apply some of the paint with one brush in a general shape and then use another brush to kind of scrub in that paint while it's still wet, right? So the brush I'm actually using to move the paint around the canvas doesn't have any paint on it initially, right? The only paint that it is going to have on it is it's going to pick up some of the drier paint that is already on the canvas and move it around and scrub it in. And what this does is allows me to get this nice atmospheric quality to the paint and get that nice range of blendedness and fogginess, that kind of ambient atmospheric quality for my shadows. So I applied that to, obviously, the shadow that is behind the fan, ceiling fan on the ceiling, but also in the corners of the room, and using it to kind of define these perspective lines of the drop ceiling a little bit more. What's nice, too, is that drier, scumbling, scratching paint technique contrasts really well. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it too well, but with some of the drips that we had initially done, right? When you're scratching and scumbling over areas that had drips on them, those drips actually come through and create a very distinct texture, which is really nice and can really help create a sense of depth and yeah, helps to develop the painting. So I had to kind of troubleshoot and figure that out with this painting, but I think it's turned out quite nice. I'm really happy with how the shadow on the ceiling turned out and the sense of space that's in this painting. So if we're going to do this painting here, so let me want this painting to be is kind of looking over this. Oh, it says my connection to the internet is okay. I think we're good. Sorry, my internet connection almost cut out there for a second. What was I saying? Right. So this is a landscape scene, and I've always wanted it to be kind of a nighttime scene, a nocturne scene, as they're called in landscapes, overlooking a lake or river or some kind of body of water. Right. We have this silhouetted tree line here, and right now I have this really bright but dark Prussian blue color that is acting as the reflection of the tree line in the water, and that kind of fell down into these glazed sections. And so what I want to do is focus a little bit on the sky and the water. So what we're going to do for the sky is we're going to use that drier paint technique I was just talking about from ceiling fan, right? I'm going to try and scratch and scumble into this into this dry surface, right? Again, just like on the ceiling fan, not working into a wet surface, not working into linseed oil or any other medium, but working straight into that dry surface of my painting to be able to scumble, bring out the texture of the paint strokes and the wood grain in this case, right? Because it's on a wood panel versus the canvas texture. So we're going to try that. Not quite sure what color I want to use yet for that scumbling process, but probably some kind of darker bluish purple gray. So I'm going to grab my palette knife here, and we're going to angle you down on my palette. The palette's a bit of a mess just because I've been working on several different paintings as of late. So we're going to, got some Prussian blue right here. We're going to start with that. Start with the Prussian blue, and I'm going to mix it right on top of it. This is still a little bit wet from another painting I was working on the other day. I'm going to grab some dioxazine purple. We're going to mix some of this purple color into that blue. And then what I'm actually going to do to kind of create a mixed black, right? I've talked about this before in some past live streams, but a lot of times you don't want to use straight black out of the tube, such as ivory black or light black. You want to mix a black using several different dark colors. Now, there are several ways to do that. A lot of times it involves mixing complementary colors, but of naturally darker pigments, such as like a Prussian blue and, well, I use like a Venetian red, but orange is the complement. So you're mixing that kind of cool and warm color together to get that natural grayed out black dark tone. Another good one that I really like to use is phthalo green and dioxazine purple. So that's what we're going to do. I just mixed dioxazine purple into my color right here. And I'm going to grab phthalo blue. Give me a second to find it. Here it is. Sorry, phthalo green. I think I said phthalo blue. Squeeze some of that. And I'm going to go ahead and grab some more purple as well. Put that over here. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so I'm going to take some more of that purple here because we need a little bit. Where's this? There we go. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I've got a big jar of brushes here. Might be in the way. All right. So we got some dioxazine purple. And I'm going to take some of that phthalo green right here. And we'll mix that together. Oh, that's a really nice mixed black. And if you're ever curious what, to make sure it is a nice dark color, a nice mixed together color, because sometimes it's really hard to tell with the pigments, you can actually take just a little bit of it on your finger. And if you have like a white surface, which I'm just going to use my wall right now because it's not a big deal, and you can wipe it away, right? And it thins out that pigment. You can see that's still pretty blue. So I want it to be a little bit more green. So I'm going to take some more green, mix that into my color here. Again, we're mixing that nice dark mixed black using several different colors, several different darker pigments. And now I'm going to go ahead and take some of that red because I have a lot of green in it now, that complementary color. That bluish green is my nice cool red. That's going to warm it up and make that color a little bit less intense, right? It's going to desaturate my color. So I got that nice and mixed well. Scrape it up. Let's go ahead and give me that finger test again, right? Take a little bit off my palette knife here. And oh, that looks pretty good. A nice dark greenish color. I don't know if you can see that from there. So what we're going to do, we're now going to take that color. And like I said before, we are going to dry it out, so to speak, right? So I'm going to go ahead and use this brush that I was using on my fan painting. And there's a lot of noise outside today. I know there's a train behind my house, but like, Jesus, cars beeping, dogs barking. So I apologize for any of the random noises. So we're going to dry out my brush here. Then we're going to take some of this, get some of that on my brush, and then we're just going to work it back and forth into the brush, really try and dry it out on my palette. That way when we apply it to my sky, right, we don't have a whole lot of paint on my brush. We want just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and just get the very top edge of my painting, right? Because I want it to work dark to light down towards my horizon line here. So actually just going to work a little bit of dark paint right along this surface. I'm not being too picky because, again, I'm going to take another brush and show you just what I mean about scumbling, scratching it into the surface, really working it into the surface of my painting to spread out that pigment, get that nice ethereal atmospheric quality. So I don't need a whole lot of paint. I might need just a little bit more over here. All right. So we have some paint on my canvas. Go ahead and smooth that out just a little bit. And right now that just that doesn't look very good, does it? So, but that's because we are going to take another brush once I clean it out. I'm going to dry this brush really well. I do not want a whole lot of mineral spirits or turpentine paint thinner in my brush, in those bristles of my brush, because I want it to be nice and dry to be able to scumble and move that paint in the way that I want it. So let's get you a little closer here. Very good. Okay, so now I have this darker color here. We're going to start to scumble. See how this turns out. Already I'm starting to tell that I'm going to need more paint on the surface of my painting. But you can see I'm kind of scrubbing the brush into the surface, and it's starting to create that hazy atmospheric quality. So what we're going to do, get some more paint on my brush, my other brush, and we're going to actually apply much more paint than I initially thought, because it looks like we're going to need it. Looks like we're going to need it. There we go. I'll use the width of my brush as kind of an indexical mark. We've talked about that in the past before. Indexical mark means you're making a mark or covering a section of an area based on the width of your brush. Artists that have used this before, Frank Stella in his famous stripe paintings. stripe abstract paintings using the width of the brush as a point of ontology, almost, to create that indexical mark as relating to the hand. All right, so now we have more color in my sky. So now I'm going to go back in with this other brush. Remember, again, I do not have any paint on this brush right now, right? No paint at all. I'm going to move around the paint that I already have on my painting. So we're going to start to scrub and push this paint around. A lot of times it helps to have a brush with a little bit stiffer bristles. This brush doesn't really have too stiff of bristles, but the reason I'm using it is because it's kind of an older brush. I don't really care about it too much. So because you don't want to use a super nice brush to, you can see I'm kind of flattening the bristles and kind of going against the shape of the brush in general, which for this specific kind of paint application is good, but with a lot of other brushes, you don't really want to do that, especially if it's a nice brush you spent 20, 30 bucks on, because yes, brushes do get that expensive. Super nice brushes. You want to take care of them. So you can start to see blending out that color into my sky. And it's working pretty nicely. And it's actually bringing out, again, it's bringing out the texture of the paint strokes that I already had there before and the texture of the wood panel. It's looking pretty good. I'm liking how this is turning out. Again, not adding any additional paint onto my canvas or my surface, my wooden panel here. I'm just scrubbing and moving around the paint that is already on, that I already applied to the surface in order to get that ethereal quality. I'm going to take a step back. It's looking pretty good. I think I still need more paint on it. It's always good to start with less paint and work, especially when you're with this kind of technique here. It's good to start with less paint and work up towards adding more paint, because it's easier to add paint, obviously, than to take away in case things change. I'm going to add some more paint. Again, the paint that I'm adding right now doesn't have any mediums in it. It's just that straight mixed color from paint straight out of the tube. And the reason I want that is because then the paint is drier, so much drier. It's a little thicker, a little tackier, and it makes it much easier to kind of scrub around on the surface and really work into my painting. Okay, we've got a good amount of paint. Hopefully I don't need any more paint than this, because I feel like if I add any more paint to this, it's going to really kind of overtake the painting, and that's not what I want. So we're going to go back over here. Start to work this color into my sky. Notice how I'm kind of working in circles as well. You can work side to side, but I'm working in circles because it has both a vertical and a horizontal movement to it. And so that kind of scrubs into the grain of my wood a little bit better than just one or the other, I should say. Okay. That's looking good. That's looking good. So then that purplish color really starts to come through in that wood grain, that texture, right? Kind of gives you that nice layered quality. So I'm going to work my way across my sky. And actually, I'm looking in the computer screen here, and it's nice because it kind of gives me that distance perspective. Kind of looks like rain clouds, or when you see a rainstorm in the distance and you kind of see the sheets of rain falling, it kind of adds that sort of feel to it, especially on the wooden panel because of that wood grain coming through. Starting to look a little bit more like a nighttime scene, which is good. Notice how also I'm not really being too careful not to get it on the tree line, because the tree line I'm going to go over eventually anyway and add some more detail and texture into that as well. So this is kind of like dry glazing in a way, if you want to think about it that way, because I'm overlaying this darker color over top of a lighter color, but I'm not doing it with like a really thinned out wet paint. I'm doing it with kind of scratching it and scruffing it into the surface. I don't really know a good word to describe it. But that's a good way to think about it, because I'm trying to achieve a different color and that sense of gradient, right? That slow value shift through this kind of pushing and really scraping it into the surface. Take another step back. It's looking pretty good. Sometimes it's good to clean off your brush every now and again, because there is paint that builds up in the bristles on your brush while you're doing this, right? And the whole point is to move around the paint that's already there on the painting surface rather than applying and adding any paint in addition, right? So I want my brush to be nice and clean so I can really just move around what's already here. So we're almost there. Whew, hands getting tired. Sometimes, this is a good, sometimes one hand gets tired, you switch hands, use your other hand. If you're able to do that, especially with technique like this, where you're just scratching and scrubbing the paint with the surface, a lot of times you don't need your dominant hand in order to do that. But obviously I do have more control with this hand. So almost there. And it's not perfect. It doesn't look exactly the way I want it to look, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. And from here on, I can start to add some painting and continue scratching and scumbling into the surface to get what I want. But if we take a step back, right, you can see it has that nice nighttime gradient, that nice sense of glow from that underlying paint underneath. it's looking pretty good. It looks a little splotchy here and there. I don't mind that too much because it kind of gives me a sense of some clouds, like I said, like some rain clouds, things like that. But it's not really in any particular kind of logic or composition. So I'll work back into it a little bit, trying to make it a nice even colored, even gradient all the way across. And in addition, because what's creating these tinier, more individual strokes is using the smaller brush. So what I can do is grab a larger brush, maybe a house painting brush. See if I can find a good one in here. Here we go. This looks pretty good, I think. Maybe not. Looks like I used acrylic paint. Here we go. Yeah. So I've got this nice Sherline house painting brush. Looks like it's 1.5 inches, right? So I can use this to continue, again, not adding any paint to this brush. Completely looks like I haven't used this brush at all before, which is really nice. So it's got no paint on it, no medium on it, no pigment yet. And I can use that to help continue to soften up and scrub into this surface to create that nice ethereal quality. And that is looking nice because, again, some of those brush strokes were showing, the individual brush strokes from the smaller brush were showing through, but this is going to help eliminate that. And I can kind of work it back and forth, really pushing that paint, that drier paint around on the surface, scrubbing at it. And it's going to help me get this really nice kind of ethereal quality to the gradient of my sky. Another really nice aspect of applying paint this way is, again, you do get that nice underglow, right? That's the sign of a really good glaze, is when the light underneath it is still really showing through, that sense of glowing warmth in your paint, or that glowing light. And so applying the paint like this helps maintain that sense of light that's coming from the color that's underneath, right? This top color is not totally overwhelming that under color. It's actually blending with it optically because you're scratching that paint into the surface, and it is giving you that really nice gradient. That's looking really nice. And again, looks much more like it's at nighttime, right? Or like maybe just at dusk. Again, take another step back. You can see it really brings out the contrast and starkness of that tree line, that silhouetted tree line, which we'll work into probably the next live stream next week, next Tuesday. So, all right. Okay, so that is dry paint techniques. Let's talk really quick. I don't make this video too much longer. Let's talk really quick about some wet paint techniques. Specifically in this, I'm going to talk about applying specific mark making, right, into with wetter, thinned out paint. Now, what I like to do, and what I've done with a lot of paintings that I don't think I actually have any examples of it in here, but using this kind of calligraphic way of mark making to recreate the ripples of water on the surface of this water right here. And we're going to do that using a flat brush. And I'm actually going to use the same brush that I applied that darker pigment with. So we're going to clean out this brush here. And then we have to decide what kind of color we want to use on top of this. I'm thinking something somewhat brighter, but I'm not sure if I want it to be a blue, or I'm not quite sure yet. Maybe we'll add like a buoy in here or something too, you know, like or maybe a person standing in the water. Not quite sure yet. If you have any ideas of something I should add in this foreground to give a little bit of focus and add to the depth of the painting, please let me know in the chat. Or if you're one of my students, shoot me an email. All right, so we're going to angle you down here. And again, using the mediums we've been using, we've got, sorry, I'm looking for a specific tube of paint while also trying to talk. We've got our mineral spirits and our linseed oil and maybe even some liquid again. So let's, I just poured out some titanium buff. Love that color. Excellent color, especially for mixing those lighter colors if you don't want the white to dominate your color. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to I'm going to start with the titanium buff. I kind of like this this grayer color, and I think we're going to add. Let's mix. Kind of run out of room here on my palette. Let's mix it over here. Let's mix. I think we need some green. I think we need some warmer green. So I'm going to come over here. I have a little bit of this warmer green. I was starting to dry under it. I'm going to mix that into my color. And I don't want it to be too light, because if I make it too light, it's already a pretty dark painting. So the contrast of the color, you can see just how bright that is, right? That would dominate the painting way too much. And that's not what we want. We want something that's going to kind of subtly the surface of this water. And so I'm trying to, I have some older colors here, get some gray in that. That looks pretty nice. That looks pretty nice. Just starting to get there. I think I still need a little bit more of warmer green. So I'm going to come up here and grab a little bit of sap green. If I haven't, yeah, there we go. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's going to be good. This kind of warm green, gray. Let's see what that looks like against painting. Oh, that's nice. That is nice. I don't know if you can really see that color too well, but there we go. Right? That's going to sit really nicely on the surface of this painting. And again, I don't need to mix a whole lot of this color, particularly because right now what we're going to do is actually thin it out a whole lot. We're going to thin it out with a decent amount of mineral spirits. So dip my brush in the mineral spirits, come over here and really thin it out. Now, the reason I like to use a flat brush is because it's going to give me a really precise edge. And you'll see what I mean. I'm going to use it kind of like a chisel tip marker in a way. So I'm going to load up my brush with this thinned out pigment. Okay. And I'm going to back you up just a little bit. All right, so I'm trying to create, trying to make more sense of where the water of my lake actually ends and the tree line starts, which is right here along this line. So what I'm going to do is come in here with this thinner paint, my flat brush. Let's see if I can get this good. I'm going to start to use these thinner lines, almost like I'm drawing with the paint rather than I am. Okay. To really create that sense of surface. Kind of using a little bit of a dotted line right on the edge of my paint here, or sorry, edge of my lake. And then I can work back down towards my foreground. And what's nice is the paint actually thins out a little bit as I go to help create this sense of waves and sense of rippling water under moonlight right now, which is really nice. And get some. Start to use these more specific kind of curved shapes to create some different types of ripples. Not being too specific, it's much more about the flow of the paint and the way the paint is naturally going to thin out as I apply it more to the surface, right? So I'm using these straight lines over top of each other to help create that sense of the ripples getting closer together, right, as they move in space, and then they spread out and open up as they come towards us. So again, my paint is really thin, kind of using it almost like it's ink or thinned out watercolor gouache painting, right? Let's get this line. Work my way across here. You can even use the flatter part of my brush instead to use the bristles to kind of create that water surface tension closer to my horizon or to the other side of my shore. Very good, very good. So again, the difference between this and my sky is my paint is really wet, really thin, right? So I can almost draw with it like it's like on the end of a nib of like a calligraphy nib. Whereas this is much more about using a brush to really scrub and push that paint into the surface to spread it out thin. So it's all about thinning your paint to layer colors in both a dry and wet technique. I hope that this video has been helpful to you, and at least somewhat entertaining. And I think we're going to leave it at that. Next time you see this painting, you'll see a lot more water work or drawing on the surface for the water ripples. Thanks again for tuning in. Take care, stay healthy, and I will see you next Tuesday. All right, thanks. See ya.